one here. Amen. All right. So we are continuing with this sermon called Kingdom Way, that we are been going through the Gospel of Matthew all the way through. We started at before Advent, before the Christmas season, and we've been going through here. And then since we've been in Lent, which started on Ash Wednesday, what was that, 4 weeks ago now, something like that? We've been going in the narrative of Matthew. We've been going through Holy Week. And we remember there's all these important things. Remember on Palm Sunday, when we celebrate that, like that's Jesus comes riding into Jerusalem on this on a small donkey, right? To all these big shouts of save us, save us, save us, Hosanna, Hosanna, Hosanna. And you know people as they're like waving things, they're like, shouldn't he be on a big white war horse? Like, why is he on a donkey? Doesn't he know he doesn't look cool riding that donkey? Like all that stuff. Like that. He's doing all this, and then he goes into the temple, and he doesn't kick all the baddies like of Rome out and all of that stuff. Instead, what he does is kick all the money changers out. How this whole temple system has pushed aside the marginalized, has pushed aside all of those who cannot be close to there anymore, has pushed aside the Gentiles, those on the outside that know the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is for them. And then by the fig tree outside, he looks up at the Temple Mount and he says, if you have enough faith, you can throw this mountain in the sea. And he's talking about the temple. And that's this whole Lent journey in Matthew is taking us and having us confront this idea of if you have enough faith, you can throw that temple into the sea. You can throw all of this stuff into the sea. Like you can throw it all there because so often we think all this externality stuff is the way that we get to God. And it's a good way. It's a good way. We gather all here together. That's good. But God can be with you. And we see that the main idea in Matthew is that God is Emmanuel. God is with us. And last week we ended the sermon. Is halfway through in chapter 26. We're in chapter 26. The crucifixion happens in chapter 27. Next week's theme is simply this: Jesus is king, but we choose Barabbas. Right? Like that's what we're talking about next week. Another cheery sermon. Buckle up for this one. And before we get into this one, I need to tell you, after we wrote this sermon, Mark and I write all my sermons with my buddy Mark. He and I were like coming to blows on all this stuff. But we came over there, and I was like, oh, this is such a big idea. First service, I think the sermon went pretty good. No guarantees, though. Because I've noticed on these sermons that are big ideas, they don't always get conveyed well, but I think we'll see it happen. We'll see how it goes. But we ended last week with Jesus around that table with the disciples, and he says, all of you will betray me. All will fall away. But then he's like, but take heart, right? And he says, but after I have risen, he gives us this good news. After I've risen, I will go ahead of you to Galilee. Take heart, I will rise again, and I will see you. It's this beautiful picture of the resurrection, right? After Jesus is arrested and crucified. And then Peter takes this beautiful vision here. He takes it, he's like, oh, that's so pretty. And he throws it on the ground and starts trampling on it as he says, even Jesus, even if all fall away, I will never. I never will. All these jabronis over there, they will, they all will fall away. I never will. And you can see Jesus' reaction to this. He's just like, oh, like just face palm to the head, like Peter, and like it's all of these frustrations that he has. And Jesus says this next thing. With the love of 1,000 generations, Jesus says, this very night, Peter, before the rooster crows, you are going to deny me, disown me 3 times. And Peter can't stand the thought. He's like, what are you talking about? And Peter does something that I think we all do so often, is that when we get like knocked back onto our heels, we're like, no, like I need to rise up in more power and more glory and more greatness and make my feelings feel all the more out there. He feels large and more powerful, so he makes his statement even more bold. Even if I have to die with you, Jesus, I will never disown you. And the disciples are like, yeah, what he said. Like I agree with I agree with that. That's great. And what we end up seeing, because we know Peter's story, we know he denies. We see that he becomes the very thing that he hates. And that's a struggle that we all have. That we become the very thing that we hate. One of our modern day prophets, I've been enjoying that phrase lately, I've been using it, is my favorite director is this guy named Christopher Nolan. He's done like that. He did the Dark Knight trilogy. We're kind of talking about that here for a second. But he also did Inception and Interstellar, which is peak movie. If you haven't seen Interstellar, I'm not even sure if Jesus is in your life, right? That's great movie. Like that, he just did Oppenheimer last summer. Like amazing movie. And one of his quotes from The Dark Knight, which is the second movie of the Batman trilogy that he did, is this one right here. And what it is, it's Harvey Dent, who is the attorney general for Gotham, for the city there, and he's talking with Bruce Wayne, who's Batman, if you guys don't know. Sometimes your guys' movie knowledge just worries me, all right? But he says, you either die a hero or you live long enough to become the villain. This is a phrase that haunts me, right? Because this is what sin does. That we see that we end up becoming the very thing that we hate. This is what we see on the cross of Jesus. Everyone is becoming the villain. Here in chapter 26 of Matthew, everyone becomes the very thing that they hate. Every one of them. I mean, just think about the Garden of Gethsemane, right? Jesus is going to the Garden of Gethsemane, and it's this time of agony where he's praying, God, if this cup could just go another way, if you could just take this cup from me, then think but not my will, but yours. And then he finishes praying, and he goes to see his boys, who's got his back thick and thin, that will even die for him, right? And how does he find him? Sleeping. He's like, could you not? I just needed an hour from you guys. I wasn't even asking for a day. I wasn't even asking for 70 times 7 days. Maybe it was, but never mind. I just wanted an hour. Could you not do that? Think about this. Think about how we make fun of these guys for sleeping. Didn't they know? Think about, so remember John the Baptist was arrested, and then because of the feckless king Herod and his whims because of that sexy dance, he beheaded John the Baptist. Imagine if John was arrested because his disciples were asleep. Do you think Jesus' disciples would have been probably wouldn't have happened if you guys hadn't fallen asleep? That whole thing? They're just they're coming at it. And how we look at them too. We're like, man, do you realize how many pastoral questions come up from people? They're like, why did they fall asleep? Didn't they know? Maybe it's not so much about them, they shouldn't have let Jesus down like that. Can't they even just stay awake? Maybe we would have fallen asleep, and called it righteousness because we become the very thing that we hate, And then he says to the sleepers, look, the betrayer is here. And while he was saying this, Judas came up to him. And Judas, who was one of the 12, who was one of those that was closest to Jesus, one of those that was so close to him, he was able to come up and give him a kiss on the cheek. which I'm not even sure if I would have been cool. Like if Tom came up to me and he like gives me a peck right on the cheek. I was like, I don't know, Tom. Do we know each other that well? Oh, I was trying to hold your hand last Saturday. I was. It's true. It's true. Like, like that. We were waiting in line at Universal. Like, so like that whole thing. But it's, like he's so close that he comes and they all seize and arrest Jesus. Then all of a sudden this commotion starts, right? And with that, one of Jesus' companions reached for his sword, drew it out, and struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his ear. Okay. Who drew the sword? Peter. Good job. Good job. Does it say that here? No. Which is fascinating. The other Gospels do. Why doesn't Matthew? Why doesn't Matthew? One of his companions. I think it's meant for us to see something. It's meant for us to maybe, rather than just blaming Peter, for us to embody that role just a little bit, right? Because we know who Jesus is. We know what his way is. We know what the way of the kingdom is. It's Jesus is meant to be the Prince of Peace, right? And yet one of the disciples, which I think we could stand in for, decides to pick up a sword and go to war to protect, right? And Jesus has to correct him. And he says, for all who draw, he's like, put the sword away. For all who draw the sword will die by the sword. Put that away. Put away all of that hatred that you have. Put that all away. Because I think what we see is that we are so willing often to pick up the sword, to fight, to become like, yeah, Jesus, we need to protect, yeah, you're the Prince of Peace and you're the good thing and all that, but to protect that peace, we got to get all angry and bust heads together to make it happen. We're willing to resort to violence. And Jesus says, if you're going to go to violence, then you will die in that violence. Because if you use violence, then that is all that you will ever get. I think we see this all over the place. Like, think about when you're reading like a social media post and someone says something really dumb, and you're like, I need to correct this error. And you get in there and you're like, you're typing away, and you have like and you're just writing, and you're like going into nirvana. You have like the third eye coming out, like, oh, here it is. Like, it's amazing, like over there. And like you're not noticing any of your grammar or spelling mistakes or any of that stuff. And you hit send, and you feel so self-righteous, and you read it again. You're like, oh man. And the comments start coming in. You're like, oh, I was a bit of a jerk there, right? Like I wasn't nice. Like that's whenever I have noticed that I have acted in a self-righteous way to put someone in their place, I end up destroying them. That I end up serving my own self-righteousness, and I become completely willing to walk on other people in order to make it better, right? It's true. And this is all what's happening on the way to the cross. But on the cross, it stops the violence. It absorbs it. Forgiveness absorbs, gets rid of the evil. Because that's what forgiveness does. And the cross is a beacon of forgiveness. Going back to that Dark Knight line, Christopher Nolan, last year when he came out with Oppenheimer, one of his pressers, he said this. I'm going to read most of it. It's very long, so I didn't put it all on the screen, but I'll point when we get to the place where that is. He goes, I'm plagued by the line from the Dark Knight, and I'm plagued by it because I didn't write it. My brother wrote it. And it kills me because it's the line that most resonates. And at the time, I didn't even understand it. You either die a hero or you live long enough to become the villain. I read it in his draft and I was like, All right, I'll keep it in there. It's an interesting line, but I don't really know what it means. Is that really a thing? And then over the years, since that film has come out, it just seems truer and truer. In Oppenheimer, it's absolutely that. We build them up, tear them down. It's the way we treat people. We become the thing that we hate. We're trying to protect something that we love so much, and we become the very thing that we hate. Caiaphas is a great example of this. When Jesus goes before the courts and all that stuff, and Caiaphas, think about who Caiaphas is. He is the high priest. He is the guy that's in charge of all of this stuff. He knows the scriptures back and forth. He knows the scriptures like you know that middle shelf in your fridge. Like that. I'm not talking about the top shelf or the drawers in the bottom. You don't know what's going on in those. And some of you are too afraid to look. You're like, you can see something growing through the frosted glass, and you're like, if I don't look, it's not a problem. Right? Like that's he knows it, like that middle, like where you keep all the, like all that stuff you go to all the time, like that. He knows the scriptures like that. He knows what Amos said when he's like, your worship, your services in the temple and all that stuff are like foolishness because you don't care for the people. He knows what the prophets have said. He knows what all of this is. He knows that as a priest, he sits in that place of the compassion of God. That he comes and holds an office much like mine, where when you have, like your life is falling apart, someone has died, relationships are being ripped apart, you're sad, you've lost your job, whatever it is, and you come to me, you expect me to be compassionate, right? Like this is who some of you are like, no, I don't expect that from you. Like that got real quiet there. I'm like, all right. Here we are, like that's, but we expect that. We expect that Caiaphas is supposed to be in that mode, and yet he's holding a sham trial. Like, can you imagine me holding a sham trial? It's like, Judy, I've had enough, and you're like, enough of what? You know what you did, and take her out and all these things. You'd be like, that's a sham trial. And all of a sudden I got Jan saying things against Judy that aren't true. Can you believe that? How dare I? Right? But that's kind of what Caiaphas is doing. He's holding this sham trial against Jesus. And he tells Jesus, he's like, tell us plainly, are you the Christ? Are you the Messiah, the Son of God? And Jesus is like, yeah, you said so. You said so. But then he says this. But I tell you, from now on, you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand in the power and the coming of the clouds of heaven. Ooh, snap, Jesus, you got him. You don't think so? What? Do you guys remember what Caiaphas does right after Jesus says this? He rips his clothes like Hulk Hogan. Like he rends his garments, right? Why does he say that? Wait, what is Jesus saying that's so crazy here? It's because it is bonkers. I'm going to tell you why, right? Some of you know why, because you're in Bible study, right? Right, Ed? like that's, some of you know why. It's because Jesus is quoting Daniel chapter 7, what Coley read just a little bit ago. He's quoting Daniel chapter 7. And what's going on in Daniel 7 is that there is these four beasts are coming out of the sea, and they represent all these powers and dominions of the world. They are snarling and look scary and all this stuff. And then you have this one mega super beast, which has a horn that spouts out of it, and this is an artist rendering. It's a photograph of it, right? Like over here, like that. And this horn is just yelling out obscenities and is boastful and all this stuff, and it's this mega super beast. And in the midst of that then God comes. That it looks like this mega super beast is so powerful, and no one will ever be able to conquer it. Then God comes in and just handles it. Caiaphas would have known that like that middle shelf in your fridge. And when Jesus says this quote, the Son of Man will be seated at the right hand, he knows exactly what Jesus is saying. He knows exactly what Jesus is doing. And that is, Jesus is calling Caiaphas the mega super beast. Like, he's calling Caiaphas. It's like, Caiaphas, you have become what you hate. Right? You have become the beast here. And so he knows that. He sees it and he's like, like he has uttered blasphemy. What further witness do you need? Like, he's calling me the mega super beast. Like, he's calling me that, all these things. And he tears up all of his things like that. And like, this is just what he would have known. Just like if we all went to a Star Wars conference and you're walking around, you're like, people, they dress up here. I'm impressed. And like someone came up behind you and went, I am your father. You know? You wouldn't go, oh, was that Luke? You know? You wouldn't be saying that. You'd be going, oh, that's Darth Vader. You would have just known. Caiaphas just knows, because he knows this beyond a shadow of a doubt. He has become the very thing he hates. And you see this stuff in popular culture too. So the big theme parks, they do all these Halloween shows. You know, they have, like, Universal does Halloween Horror Nights, and SeaWorld and Busch Gardens do Hallow Scream. And they all do these, like, really high production value shows that are way better, if not a little like, woo, that's a little the edge, like all that stuff. But they're way better than they should be, right? And Busch Gardens Hallow Scream show last year was really interesting. It was about this woman who was a bride, but before she got married there, she died and ended up in hell. And she's down there, and she's like, what am I doing here? No, I'm a good person. I don't deserve any of this. And so she goes up to the devil himself, who's this beastly figure with this giant crown of all these big, ugly horns coming up out of it. And she's like, you've messed up. I am a good person. And the devil disagrees. He's like, you're down here for some reason. And she's like, no, you will pay the price for this. And the rest of the show is them doing like a dance battle. But you know, it's a show. But like they goes to blows with the super mega beast and the devil. And you know what? She defeats the devil. She wins the victory over him and over the super mega beast. And as they do that, all the demons around them like are cowering to her as she goes up to the devil's throne and she sits on him. And then they come and they put the crown, the devil's crown, with all the horns on her, as she takes the role of the devil. And the people that were all there are like, whoa, you pastor probably didn't like that at all, did you? And we're like, actually, that was really good. That was really good. Because when we let the sword and our sin reign, we become the very thing that we hate. It's what we see happening in Caiaphas. It's what we see happening all through the gospel. And we see all these cast of characters in chapter 26 all becoming the thing that they hate. I mean, think about the priests. Think about me. Look at what they're doing at Jesus' crucifixion. This is chapter 27. Also, the chief priests and the scribes and the elders mocked him. Can you imagine? Like if me and Vance and Ed and maybe we'll grab Tom and all that stuff and we go over to like a capital punishment and we just start making fun of the criminal, you'd be like, that's a bad look. They're sitting there mocking someone being crucified. It's not a good look. If he saved others, can he not save himself? They've become the very thing that they hate. And we get to Peter. And we all know the Peter story. He denies Jesus 3 times, but in the midst of the last denial, he then began to invoke curses onto himself. Oh my goodness. whenever it's like, trust me or curse me, like he goes, I don't know the man. And he hears the rooster crow, and he sees the very nature of himself as he weeps bitterly, as he has become the thing he hates. This is why the cross of Jesus is so important. The cross of Jesus is a beacon of forgiveness. God did not become the devil to defeat evil. He did not become evil to defeat our sin. He did not choose to just explode the earth in a wrathful rage. Instead, we see his kingdom way is that he's absorbed all evil on the cross and took it away so that you, every one of you, would be able to be the image of God that he created you to be. It's backwards. It's beautiful. It's the kingdom way. Let's say a prayer. God, we thank you that you love us and that you're with us. Lord, as we often become what we hate, Lord, help us to see that you absorb all of that onto the cross and take it away. Thank you, Jesus, for always loving us and being with us. Amen. And we'll sing our next song. It's very linty, linty tune. It's so linty, it almost has like a sea shanty thing going in on it. So we'll sing this together.